My sister and I walked across the stage together, celebrating our college graduation. Except our parents only paid for her tuition, coldly telling me, "She deserved it, but you didn't." So I'd secretly arranged one more surprise at the ceremony that left them pale, mouths agape, and questioning everything they thought they knew. My name is Rachel Moore. I arrived in this world 4 minutes after my twin sister, Hannah. Those 4 minutes, it seemed, made all the difference in the eyes of our parents, Charles and Elizabeth Moore. We were twins, yet to them, there appeared to be only one true daughter, and that, unfortunately, was not me. From my earliest childhood, I recognized the disparity in how we were treated. Hannah always received the newest, prettiest, and most desired possessions. She got the pristine dolls. I received the hand-me-downs from the neighbors' children. She wore the fresh dresses. I wore the ones already worn thin. When Hannah cried, my mother would drop everything, rushing to comfort, embrace, and soothe her. When I stumbled and scraped my knee, all I heard was, "You're a strong girl. Rachel, be patient." I was handed a paper napkin and sent back to play. As a child, I began to grasp that to be acknowledged, I needed to accomplish something extraordinary. After all, my tears, for no apparent reason, went unnoticed. I recall one of the most vivid moments from that time. I was around 5 years old. Hannah and I were playing in the yard. She wanted to climb a tall metal structure on the playground, but became frightened and started to cry. I was scared myself, but I climbed up and jumped off anyway, to demonstrate. It was safe. I hoped my parents would commend my bravery. Instead, Dad rushed to Hannah, hugged her, and told her she was brave, though he hadn't even attempted to climb himself. He merely glanced at me and quietly murmured, "Be careful, Rachel. You know you could hurt yourself." That was it. No pride, no approval for me. Perhaps this set the pattern for our relationship for many years. The more I strove to prove I warranted attention, the more indifferent they became. Yet, Hannah could simply smile or do something insignificant, and my parents would immediately shower her with praise. I carefully concealed my envy. It's difficult for a child to comprehend why they receive less affection. I cried at night, clinging to the worn teddy bear my grandmother had given me. My grandmother was the sole person who always looked at me with genuine warmth. She resided in another city, so our visits were infrequent, but each time she came, I was enveloped in a warmth my mother and father, sadly, could not provide. Once we entered school, the differences became even more pronounced. Hannah was consistently commended for her efforts. For example, she crafted an ordinary project from cardboard and paper with many flaws, but my mother would exclaim, "This is a masterpiece, Hannah. How did you create it so beautifully? Oh, you're so clever." Meanwhile, I was achieving my first successes in writing. I earned certificates in drawing competitions, wrote short stories that garnered my teacher's attention. At home, however, this only elicited a cool response. "Well, yes, well done, Rachel, but be careful, don't get conceited." I sensed a tension in these words, as if my mother didn't even wish to concede that I was capable of success without their assistance. I studied diligently, avoiding complaints or performative whining, because I understood it was futile. One day, when I was about 10, Hannah and I brought home our report cards. I had straight A's. She had a couple of good grades amidst C's and B's. My parents, glancing at my A's, simply nodded. "Well, you're a smart girl, that's clear." But upon seeing Hannah's report card, they exclaimed, "Wow, 3 B's. Great, Hannah, we're proud of you." I remember my heart sinking. It felt as though the reward for my hard work had been given to someone else. This pattern repeated consistently. The older we grew, the more evident the familial divide became. My parents believed Hannah required their attention. She was more sensitive, more delicate, more vulnerable. And I, in their estimation, could stand up for myself. "You'll figure it out, you'll find a way out," and so on, in the same vein. At some point, I reconciled myself to the fact that I wouldn't receive much support from my parents. But resigning didn't mean surrendering. On the contrary, it propelled me forward, each time with even greater determination, constantly proving, not so much to them, but to myself, that I was valuable. When Hannah and I neared graduation, the question of college arose. We both decided to pursue accounting. It was a remarkable coincidence. This interest in numbers, finance, and reporting was ignited in me by my love for order and precision. In Hannah, I never observed any particular inclination for such subjects, but she stated, "Well, this is a popular profession, and then we'll see." My parents took this very seriously. They paid for her education in full, immediately, so Hannah wouldn't have to concern herself with anything during her studies. She could focus solely on her academics. And to me, As soon as the conversation turned to funding my education, they said, "You're smart, Rachel. You can probably get a grant and earn some extra money if necessary. You won't get lost." On one hand, I felt hurt that they were expending exorbitant sums on my sister while I had to strive for every scholarship and grant through my own efforts. On the other hand, this was what provided me another push not to give up. I thought, if they are so certain I am strong, then I will demonstrate just how strong I can be. I began compiling documents for grants, applying for all sorts of scholarships, searching for student vacancies to cover at least a portion of my expenses myself. We both attended the same college, though our experiences there were entirely distinct. Hannah lived in a spacious on-campus room. Her parents regularly sent her money for everything, from textbooks to clothes and entertainment. She socialized with classmates, attended parties, and led a cheerful, carefree life. I found a modest dorm room, worked part-time in the library, in the evenings, and sometimes as a cleaner there. I joined a small program where students could clean rooms for a fee. Occasionally, I even washed the floors in the dorm hallways. I did all this during hours when most of my classmates were relaxing. And in the breaks I carved out for myself, I studied, devouring tons of literature on accounting, financial analysis, and taxation. Though I was terribly tired, I understood this was my only path to achieving something. No one would hand me what I wanted on a silver platter. My sister never seemed to notice. When we crossed paths in the cafeteria or on the greens outside the building, she would say with a hint of pity, "You look tired, Rachel. Maybe you should manage your time better instead of running around everywhere." I would smile back, trying not to betray any resentment or anger, because I understood this was my choice. I chose this path, and an inner voice would whisper, "Hang in there, Rachel, you have everything ahead of you." Several semesters passed. I gradually settled in, realizing that beyond my main studies, I needed to consider my career in advance. So, I pursued various internships. I secured a position at a local audit firm where, though formally, I was on duty. I brought coffee, copied documents, helped organize papers. In return, I gained invaluable immersion experience in the real world of business. Gradually, they began entrusting me with small tasks that required specific skills. I gladly accepted every assignment. Many students from our college not only didn't attempt to get a job there, they simply believed it was impossible, as such interns were usually taken from more renowned universities. But I knocked on doors, asking for an opportunity, and I was fortunate. When my first summer in college concluded, I learned about the chance to accelerate my studies and take some of the CPA exams early. I recognized that if I worked tirelessly, I could pass some of the exams before graduation. Again, no one around me believed this was feasible for a regular student, but I felt confident in myself. I had the strength. Around the same time, I met Professor McLaughlin at an elective. He taught an additional course on international financial reporting standards. I enrolled, despite the course being challenging and extensive. On the first day of classes, he approached me after the lecture and asked, "Rachel, you have quite a strong foundation. Where did you study before?" "Well, not really anywhere in particular. I just read a lot, study, try to figure it out." "Do you like accounting?" "Yes, very much. I believe that order in numbers creates order in both business and in minds." "What a surprising formulation." He smiled. "I'm looking for an assistant who could help me prepare materials, sometimes check students' work. If you're interested, let me know." Of course, I'm interested. I'll be very happy. Euphoric with this new opportunity, I returned to my room and excitedly called my mother. I was still hoping that some praise would penetrate their usual cool approval. But my mother responded, "Well, that's good, Rachel." Then she added, "But Hannah told me she was invited to a party at a professor's country house, and there will be a lot of high society people there, so she has her own pride." I sighed heavily. The situation was clear. I was an assistant to an accounting professor, and my sister was going to a party. But for Mom and Dad, it was an equal success. Perhaps it would always be this way for them. One evening, while I was sitting in the library until closing time, I received an email. The subject line read, "Benjamin Ford Scholarship Information Letter." I opened it, not immediately understanding its significance. It turned out to be a national program, highly prestigious in the field of accounting. Each year, it is awarded to only 5 students across the entire country. The requirements were strict: excellent academic performance, outstanding extracurricular activities, leadership qualities, recommendations from professors, and many other criteria. To be honest, I hadn't even considered applying for this scholarship, thinking it was too high a standard. But Professor McLaughlin must have submitted my portfolio himself. He had a practice of recommending bright students without warning them, so they wouldn't become anxious beforehand. The email stated that I was invited to submit a formal application, as the committee had been impressed by the preview of my achievements. I sat in shock, rereading it several times, and finally, I decided, I have to try. I didn't inform my parents or Hannah about my intention. By that time, I had already learned my lesson. My aspirations, my victories, were my own concern. They wouldn't pay attention anyway, or would consider it insignificant. Why should I witness their indifference once again? It took me several weeks to prepare for the competition. I had to submit all the documents, write an essay, complete several tasks, and provide recommendations. Professor McLaughlin assisted me, offering advice, reviewing my texts, and pointing out errors. I gave it my all. Then I submitted the documents, and for several months, I simply put it out of my mind. Work, study, internship, and preparing for the CPA exams filled my days. I did not allow myself to relax for a minute. 3 months later, in the evening, after another shift at the library, I found a letter in the mail. Congratulations. You are one of 5 winners of the Benjamin Ford Scholarship. I reread these lines, experiencing a storm of emotions: joy, pride, disbelief, excitement. And most importantly, that quiet voice inside me suddenly activated, saying, "You see, Rachel? You can do it. You did it." I closed my eyes and almost cried from the feelings that overwhelmed me. For the first time, I realized that now no one would be able to ignore me. Although this sounds a little arrogant, this is exactly what I had desired my whole life, to be noticed. But inside, I was not only proud, there was also weariness. What about my parents? How would they react? Would they even want to congratulate me now? The award ceremony was announced in advance. It was to be held at one of the leading universities, with representatives of large auditing firms, investors, journalists, and teachers from all over the country attending. I was asked to bring my parents with me. This will be a special day for them. They will be able to see what you have achieved, the organizer said over the phone. I admit, I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to invite them, because I was afraid of another cold statement or underestimation. But the other part, the stubborn inner child, still hoped to receive at least a drop of pride from them. And so, I dialed the home number. "Hi, Mom. Remember how I told you I was entering this big competition?" Something like that. "Yeah, what's it all about anyway?" "I won one of the most prestigious national scholarships in accounting. I'm invited to the award ceremony, and they're asking me to bring my parents." "Really?" I heard Mom raise her voice and call out to Dad. "Charles, come here. Rachel's saying something about an award." I picked up the phone again. "When's the ceremony?" "In 2 weeks, Friday, in the morning. It's in a different city, but I'll check with you to see what's most convenient for you. They want to see you there." "Okay, we'll try to make it." Mom spoke in a tone as if she wasn't sure whether it was truly worth the time. I hung up the phone, feeling empty. "Okay," I told myself. "Even if they come, let them see it with their own eyes. Maybe then something will change." But I no longer harbored the same childish hope. I had become more hardened by this point. The day of the award ceremony arrived. I reached the university early, put on my only somewhat formal dress, a modest, classic black cut with discreet accessories. The other laureates were bustling around. We were all a little nervous. We were led into the hall where the ceremony would take place, explained that each name would be announced, the university director would recount short achievements, and present the award. We all took our places in the front rows. The hall filled with guests, and I noticed Hannah sitting next to her parents. My sister wore an expensive dress, with a chic handbag on her lap. Mom and Dad looked a little confused, as if they themselves didn't understand what they were doing in such a hall. I tried not to meet their eyes, so as not to be distracted. I was ready for the most important moment in my life. Finally, the ceremony began. The host announced one laureate after another. Vivid biographies were heard. Someone created a program for optimizing tax accounting. Someone distinguished themselves with student projects at the international level. I applauded everyone, trying to contain my excitement. And then it was my turn. The rector stood up and said, "The next student, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of resilience, discipline, and independence." Without financial support from her family, she went from being a cleaner and a librarian to being one of the best in her class. Her teachers call her a person of iron will and determination. Meet Rachel Moore. The audience burst into applause, and I heard several people stand up. I rose from my seat, feeling a wave of heat spreading through my body. As I walked toward the stage, I turned to the audience and saw my parents' faces. Mom was sitting with a cold expression, and I didn't see the usual pride in her eyes. Dad seemed surprised, as if he hadn't expected everything to be so serious. Hannah looked at me with bewilderment, mixed, it seemed to me, with a hint of envy. And then I realized, they really were seeing me, as if for the first time. I went up on stage. The rector shook my hand, presented me with an award, and briefly congratulated me. Then we took a photo, and I returned to my seat amidst the general, lively jubilation. I felt as if fate had finally repaid me for all those years when I was ignored. After the ceremony, not only Professor McLaughlin, but also other professors and representatives of large companies approached me. They congratulated me, handed me business cards, and asked if I was interested in an internship at their companies. I smiled and quietly rejoiced. Here it was, the reward for hard work. And suddenly, I saw the rector, who also came up to me and whispered in my ear, "You have proven that family is not always the one who helps. Sometimes, family is yourself. Don't forget that. Now all doors are open for you." I nodded, and then I noticed my parents and Hannah walking towards me. I saw them, sighed, and mentally prepared myself for another cold conversation. "Rachel," Mom said, trying to smile, "congratulations. You're great, I guess. But why didn't you tell me it was that serious? Have you ever listened?" I answered, simply. I thought there was little aggression in my words, more weariness and a release from years of expectation. Mom frowned, and Dad began to say something. "We always believed that you were capable of so many things, but we didn't know that. You needed help. We thought you could handle it yourself. You never asked if I needed help," I said. "It suited you to think that Rachel can do anything. But you know, sometimes I wanted someone to support me too." Mom looked at Hannah, confused. She stood silently, looking from me to my parents. Then Hannah tried to interject. "Listen, Rachel, I didn't know you were applying for this scholarship. I thought your college was paid for too." "Really?" I looked into her eyes. "Have you ever wondered how I pay for my studies and rent? Has it ever occurred to you that you and I live different lives?" Hannah made a helpless gesture. "I guess I was too busy with my own life." "Exactly. And you were all fine with it. However, I don't want to sort things out now. I don't need your approval anymore." I turned my back to them. You know, usually in such scenes in books, the main character starts crying. But I was calmer than ever. So many emotions were boiling inside me, but they were not about my family. They were about me. It suddenly became clear to me. This is the moment when I finally stopped trying to achieve their love, stopped cherishing this childhood dream that someday they would see how good I am. That evening, the university held a small reception in honor of the awardees. Investors, teachers, students, and some parents came. Mine stayed too. I only crossed paths with them by chance at the refreshment table. One of the future employers, a representative of a large auditing firm, approached and said, "Miss Moore, we'd like to discuss a possible job offer. We're impressed with your accomplishments and references. Can you come to our table?" I saw my family at the other end of the room. Mom, Dad, and Hannah were standing there, embarrassed, looking in my direction but not daring to approach. And I went to the table with investors, and we began to talk animatedly about the future that I might be offered, a starting position as a junior auditor in the New York office. That was my goal, to break into a big city, into a cool office, and engage in real audit practice. The next day, there was a scholarship dinner for the recipients, and my parents decided to attend. At dinner, my mother tried to initiate a conversation. "Rachel, we know we may not have been the most thoughtful parents, but we really do love you and Hannah equally. Maybe we just haven't had our priorities straight. It's not about love, Mom. It's about how I've always felt like I had to earn your praise, while Hannah always got it by default. I tried and I tried, but you didn't see it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm no longer used to asking." Dad sighed and extended his hand as if he wanted to pat me on the shoulder. "Forgive us, daughter. We didn't notice that you were suffering so much. I don't want to quarrel now. Just accept that everything is different now. I'm not offended. I'm just making a choice in my own favor." Hannah sat a little to the side, fiddling with her napkin. Occasionally, she glanced up at me as if she couldn't believe that I was the same quiet Rachel who always got the short end of the stick. I saw confusion in her eyes and a hint of envy, because now I was the center of attention in the room where she had always thought she belonged. And she clearly didn't like it. A week after the ceremony, I finally accepted the offer from the New York office. Another large firm was calling me to Chicago, another to Los Angeles, but I settled on New York. I was drawn by the pace of the big city and the opportunity to grow faster in a demanding environment. I continued to slowly pack my belongings, preparing to move after the end of the semester. Since then, my relationship with my family has diminished to almost nothing. Sometimes we call each other, but these are polite, brief conversations like, "How are things at work?" "Great, I have a project here." "Okay, well, we are happy." And that's it. Mom and Dad tried to somehow establish communication, but to be honest, I no longer felt the need to prove anything to them. Hannah pops up on social media every now and then, posting photos from parties, and then writes me rare letters complaining that she is having a hard time finding a job. I advise her, send your resume to different places, take courses, improve your skills. She expresses indignation. I find all this so boring. Apparently, our paths really have finally diverged. But I don't regret that we hardly communicate. It doesn't mean that I hate them or despise them. It's just that one day you stop begging for love and start choosing yourself. At some point, I realized I deserve to live for myself and not for someone's recognition. Yes, family is blood ties, but when these ties were suffocating me and devaluing me. When I graduated and officially received my diploma, my parents did not attend the ceremony. Apparently, they had other commitments, and my mother said, "You can manage without us, right?" I smiled and said, "Yes, of course I can." A week later, my grandmother called me, the same one who had always been kind to me. She said, "I'm proud of you, Rachel. You are a wonderful granddaughter. I wish I could be there with you, but you know I'm always there in spirit." I almost cried when she said that, because I realized that I wanted her to be the one to see me go up on stage, to receive my diploma, to stand there happier than I had ever been. But she was already old, and the journey would have been difficult for her. But her call was the warmest moment of that day, and I was immensely grateful to her. I remember a couple of months after graduation, I was packing my bags for New York, when Hannah walked into the room. She had decided to see me, had driven to campus in her car. I was surprised, because she hadn't been there for a long time. She came in, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to start a conversation. "Rachel, maybe you don't want to, go so far away? Our parents want us to be close." "Hannah," I answered calmly, "my parents never cared what I did. Now they suddenly want me to be close. Sorry, but I have my own path. I'm just afraid that we won't talk anymore," Hannah muttered, picking at the edge of her pillow with her fingernail. "We haven't really talked much anyway, Hannah, and you know it." She lowered her eyes and stood up, sighing heavily. Then I saw a kind of childish confusion on her face. For the first time in my life, I felt that my sister was unsure of herself. Maybe she realized that all this time her well-being was based only on the fact that her parents nurtured her as the favorite. And now it turned out that I had forged ahead, was receiving brilliant offers, and she was just finishing college, not really knowing what she wanted to do next. "Good luck to you, Rachel," she said finally, and left the room. I looked at the closed door for a few more seconds, experiencing a strange feeling. It was not anger, and it was not contempt. Rather, it was a quiet sadness. Once, we were little girls, twins who could laugh together and not think about who was born for minutes, earlier or later. But life unfolded in such a way that we were raised differently, and we ourselves became very different. I could no longer return to that childish, unconscious feeling of "we are one." Now we were strangers who crossed paths in the same family. In New York, I plunged into a frantic work rhythm. At first, it was challenging. I spent 10 to 12 hours at work, preparing reports, learning new things, communicating with clients, mastering new programs, and understanding the nuances of auditing. But I enjoyed it. I liked being in the thick of things, solving complex problems every day. I was confidently building a career, and I no longer waited for my mom or dad to praise me for another achievement. Why did I need this? I myself saw the fruits of my labor. Sometimes, when the weekends came, I would walk the streets of Manhattan, look at the skyscrapers, and reflect on how strange life can turn out. If my parents had supported me as much as Hannah, would I have become so resilient, stubborn, ambitious? Maybe not. I am grateful that fate did not give me an easy path. It made me stronger and helped me understand that the most valuable recognition is the one you give to yourself. Several years have passed. I have managed to finish my studies, gain experience, and earn a promotion. My parents, of course, periodically try to maintain contact. They send messages like, "How are you doing, daughter? It's a shame you don't visit." And I only briefly reply, "Everything is fine, thank you." Hannah pops up on social media every now and then, posting photos from parties, and then writes me rare letters complaining that she is having a hard time finding a job. I advise her, send your resume to different places, take courses, improve your skills. She is indignant. I find all this so boring. Apparently, our paths really have finally diverged. But I don't regret that we hardly communicate. It doesn't mean that I hate them or despise them. It's just that one day you stop begging for love and start choosing yourself. At some point, I realized I deserve to live for myself and not for someone's recognition. Yes, family is blood ties, but when these ties were suffocating me and devaluing me, I had to find my own freedom.